All right. Well, thanks so much for joining today. My name is Amy. I'm a part of the customer success team here at Amplemarket, and I will be hosting today's Liquid Syntax webinar. I also have a co-host, Bo. He will be helping with our Q&A and or chat. Feel free to use either. Occasionally, I'll also pause to see if there's any questions I can answer live. Otherwise, he'll be able to help you out throughout. And then, of course, we'll reserve time at the end for more questions and answers. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. It is worth noting that today's webinar is recorded and will be shared with everyone that either is attending live or registered. And then also the deck that I'm screen sharing will be a resource to you as a follow-up from today's call. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So in today's webinar, we will be discussing what is liquid syntax and how it can benefit you. We'll also go into examples that our BD team are personally using. And then we'll hop into Amplemarket and provide a demo how you can use liquid syntax in your copy and kind of go through some basics to a little bit more advanced with how you can customize the syntax options we have available. And then after the demo, of course, we'll have Q&A, but please feel free to ask questions throughout. We definitely want to make sure that if anything arises, we can help you as it's happening. We're going into what is liquid syntax. So liquid syntax is a templating language that's been developed by Shopify. The entire goal is to be able to make the coding as easy and customizable as possible in order to create like a conditional statement. So if maybe something equals X, a certain statement would be sent. For something else, it would be a different response instead. It's now available in public to everyone. And that's how it's been introduced also to Amplemarket and how we've been able to help you out there. It's worth noting there's a few nicknames here. So you can see that in the past, if you've heard of liquid or just syntax or spintax, it's all one and the same in what we'll be discussing today as well. Now going into benefits of liquid syntax. So we'll start with what typically we see without liquid syntax and then how liquid syntax can help. So without liquid syntax, what we have found is generic messaging. So when you think about your subject line and the body of your email being the same information being sent continuously, it's more likely to be picked up by spam filters because they're able to recognize that redundancy. For example, I had a client recently who had about 5 sequences running and their subject line was the same. So they were incurring about a 20% spam rate. And we were able to deduce the fact that it was a subject line that was causing the spam rates to occur. So a really great way to introduce liquid syntax is maybe using it in your subject line to create that variability at scale and to, of course, help with your open rates. Because another reason for liquid syntax without it is that the time-consuming aspect of creating multiple sequences and creating them per persona can take a lot of time. It usually takes about 1 to 2 hours to create that type of sequencing. Whereas when you combine personas together with liquid syntax, which we'll highlight here shortly, it allows you to create, let's say, 1 or 2 sequences, saving you many hours of manual copy creation. And we'll show how you can do that based on various data points like title and employee headcount, et cetera. Other ways that liquid syntax can be really helpful is because you're using it in a way that provides each email being unique. It's less likely to be picked up by spam filters, helping boost your open rate. On average, we've seen about a 6% increase in open rate by introducing liquid syntax to your outreach. And then, of course, it helps boost your conversion rates because it's more personalized based on the personas that you're speaking to. And with that, we'll go actually into a customer quote because this is something really lovely that our client Cheryl Prowler's provided. So Align Strategic is a sales consultancy company. And Cheryl initially was finding some issues in helping her clients use Amplemarket, and they were struggling with open rates. So we introduced liquid syntax to that outreach, and it helped increase their open rates by 14%. So this was a really great example where liquid syntax was super powerful. I won't read the full quote, but the top sentence, liquid syntax is not just a tool, it's a strategy. It really is that because what she was able to do was specifically target her clients' personas and help increase the open rates, help increase conversion rates. And so this is another really great tool in your toolkit to utilize in order to help with your rates as well. Now going into examples. So we'll go through a few before going into a demo of how to use it. And I think this is really important to see how Amplemarket, how our BD team is currently using liquid syntax in order to address certain pain points that our leads might be seeing. So in this scenario, what we're seeing is employee headcount. How we would be speaking to someone 201 plus employees is quite different than how we would be speaking to someone that maybe has less than 50 employees at their company. And by doing this, we're creating relevancy based on their specific pain points and challenges. And of course, in turn, this is how you could utilize employee headcount as well. So you can see here when we're looking at 11 to 50 employees, if the lead has this data point, we would be sending something about other companies using Amplemarket benefit from the platform. But of course, if they have over 201 employees, we're going to use other examples of companies utilizing Amplemarket in order to create that relevancy and how Amplemarket could be helpful. Other things to consider here, especially if this is the first time you're seeing liquid syntax in an example, at the top where it's saying if this company size equals 11 to 50, we would be providing this specific sentence. When we're looking at else if, this means that if is not true, then we would have this as an option. And then if this isn't correct and this isn't correct, then we have another option here. I'll show you how you can customize this when we get to the demo aspect, but kind of wanted to highlight quickly what we're seeing. And then of course, if no lead matches these data points, then we have else. So everything else would receive this particular sentence instead. So that way you're covering your bases, but still providing that personalization at scale. And you're also helping with deliverability because each email will be slightly different based on the lead's data points. I also wanted to highlight a preview mode just so you could kind of visually see what this would look like translated and see that the coding really is just on the back end and wouldn't be arbitrarily sent to your prospects. Now going into another example, so we can also use titles as a way to utilize liquid syntax. So this allows you to speak directly to the decision makers' needs and then, of course, highlight any specific challenges that they might be facing. And the reason why I put novice here is because this is a really easy way to add syntax without having to go too deep into adding a lot of personalization. So what we're seeing here is this primary sentence would be provided first. And then this is where liquid syntax would come into play. If their title includes CEO or chief, then it'd be as an executive, would you find this interesting? Or if it's a VP as part of their title, as a VP, would you find this interesting? So just that slight shift in creating personalization while also helping with deliverability. And then wanted again to show a quick preview of what this would look like, just so you can kind of visually see what the lead would be seeing, based, of course, on their data point as well. Now going into a slightly more advanced option with using title as the syntax option, this is where you might really want to provide some really core benefits of your product and how it can help. So in this scenario, when we're looking at specific titles, we are really diving into the challenges that they are likely facing versus it just being that slight shift in title name. And then going into preview, this is where you can see, again, that kind of translation and how Amplemarket could benefit. And of course, you being able to customize this and being able to use it in turn. Now, the last example I want to provide before we hop into the demo aspect of today's webinar is just to show you a full example highlighting liquid syntax. It's worth noting that our BD team are power users of Amplemarket. We use Amplemarket every day. So when we get to the demo aspect, I'll also show you ways to kind of start off using it. But just to kind of show you how we at Amplemarket are using liquid syntax, you can see we have it in our subject line. As I mentioned earlier, it's a really great way to help boost your deliverability because the subject line will slightly shift based on the information provided. And then we also have it for greeting in the core body of the email, and then of course with the call to action as well. If it helps, if anyone's curious, I would say on average, most of our customer base is using liquid syntax maybe in one or two areas of an email. Again, like I mentioned, this is a little bit more advanced, but could be really powerful for your outreach if you decide you'd like to get to that point. And then just because I'm also visual and hopefully this will help too, I wanted to show you how this translated specifically to a lead's outreach. So this was an actual screenshot from a lead where in their title it was manager. Therefore, this is what they would have received. But of course, you can see that there's other variables here and it would shift based on the other leads data points. Before I go into the demo, Bo, is there any questions that I can help with live?
Nothing that has come up so far, but if anyone would like to pose some questions, feel free. Send it in the chat.
It sounds good. All right, so then we will go to the platform. So it's worth noting that when you are in Amplemarket and creating a brand new sequence, the same process applies. But I already have a sequence ready to go and wanted to make sure that I highlighted that just in case you were curious. So in this particular draft that I have ready to go, I am targeting seniority sales leaders that have recently changed roles. And that's kind of the core aspect of this. I wanted to highlight this because it's a nice full loop. I don't know if anyone here has watched the previous webinars over the last 5 months, but in the very first one that we did on lead generation, we spoke about how certain signals are really powerful in order to help with reply rates. So recent job changes is a filter within the searcher. And so this applies to that signal. Then in our second webinar that we hosted by our BD team, we spoke about copy creation and being able to create personalization and also relevancy. And because this is a BD specific sequence that I'm using as well, it kind of ties into everything. And I thought you'd like to be able to see these examples live as well. But going into liquid syntax within the sequence, of course, you'll have your email stage. You'll navigate to dynamic fields. And this is where you can access both dynamic fields and liquid syntax. So dynamic fields, of course, I'm sure everyone's familiar with these, but this is a really great way to plug and play some basics like first name, title, company name, your sender information. But advanced is where our liquid syntax is housed. What we have really tried hard to do is help you to not have to learn how to code with liquid syntax. This allows you to select certain examples or mini examples and customize it to your benefits. You'll also see that from the examples provided, we're giving you a snippet on how you can customize it. So that way you don't have to know before clicking into it what it might be entailing. But what we'll do just to kind of start off this demo, I'm going to scroll down towards the bottom to where we get to random number, and then we'll go back up and kind of go from there. The reason why I think this can be helpful to start off with is because random number, Amplemarket is assigning a lead a number, and then from there providing a certain statement. So this isn't necessarily tied to what we just saw with employee headcount or title. This is tied to, again, just that random number. So really great way to use it in your subject line, in your call to action, in your greeting, and or in your send off. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. And I thought this would be a nice way to start. So that way you can see how easy it is to help with, even with just a deliverability, let alone personalization. Random choice is another really beautiful one. So we'll use this as the example here. Random choice was something that we recently introduced as a liquid syntax option about a month ago, and makes it super easy to kind of get your little toe wet into the pool of liquid syntax. So when we're looking at these options here, we can see that there's best regards, regards, cheers, and kind regards. The aspects that you wouldn't want to edit, of course, would be the curly brackets and the percentage sign, and then random choice. This is where the syntax coding is occurring. But what you can customize is the various options here. You can add more simply by adding a line and then adding in a fifth option. Of course, you can reduce the number of send-offs that you have. I'll remove kind regards in this scenario, but it's trying to highlight these easy tweaks that you can make in order for it to be your own. And what I'll do is I'll also add a comma here just to help with punctuation. And so one quick way to be able to quickly start using syntax. Now from here, you might also want to add it into, let's say, your greeting. And so another quick way to be able to use random choice quickly. And what I'll do is I'll even add in first name here. And that way you can kind of see how you can blend in dynamic fields into your greeting as well. Now we have a few options. I'll kind of quickly go through preview mode just so you can see what this looks like as well. So you can see, hi, Christian, best regards. Hey, Yvonne. And you can see these slight changes occurring in both the greeting and in the send off, which ultimately will help with deliverability. We can also see that it's already included in the subject line. So I'll also explain what we're seeing here. So in this scenario, we're using random number, which was one of the syntax options available. Now, what I will do is actually take this into the body of the email just for visual purposes so you can see what this looks like, and then we'll put it back in the subject line. Now, in this scenario, another really great way to use random because you can slightly edit your subject line and help boost deliverability. Because these are all leads that have recently changed jobs, this is where you can then add in our scenario, congrats on your new role, congrats on your new position, and congrats on your job change. Just quick, easy shifts in order to help with deliverability. And maybe I want to take it a step further and also add in first name for the dynamic field. And then what I can do is take this back into the subject line and go from there. Other things worth noting, and I know that there's a lot of ways to customize syntax, so by all means, if there's any questions, let us know. But when we're thinking about if, and then else if and else, there's so many ways to do this. So of course, if would need to remain because this is what would be considered true in the syntax option. It's ultimately up to you if you want to include else if, meaning that if you have multiple personas that you're trying to target or just multiple subject lines in this scenario that you want to utilize, that's where else if comes into play. And then else is just everything else that wouldn't include that data point. And we'll highlight this further when we do title next as the next example, but just wanted to let you know that there's quite a few ways that you can go about editing what already exists and making your lives much easier as well. So in this scenario, now that we have, we'll move into title now that we have the greeting and the send off in the subject line. So I'll add this here above the send off. And in this scenario, what we're seeing is if the title includes CEO or chief executive, they would be receiving, is this something that could be interesting to your team? If it's not a CEO or chief executive, but a director or manager, that's where it would be, is this something that could be interesting to you? For everyone else that do not apply to these titles, that's where it would be, would you have time for a quick call? Again, because this is customizable, all three of these call to actions can be amended. You do not even need to have a call to action. You could make this, let's say, the body of your email, and maybe you want to be able to address specific pain points that a CEO would be experiencing versus a manager versus anyone else that you might be contacting in that particular outreach. In this scenario, if you like the call to action, but let's say you know that there's going to be other titles that just aren't included, this is where we can add in as many else ifs as that we would like. So we'll use one as the example here. Let's find one. Quite a few CEOs. Okay, so then there's VP. So in this scenario, what I'll do is I'll create one for VP. And of course, I can add this anywhere between else if and then else. So I'll go ahead and add it here just to make it a little bit easy. And then, I think I have caps lock on. Am I hitting the mark? Another way to have a call to action. So then if we go through here to preview mode, and we're looking here to the right, this is where you can see that slight shift occur. And then of course, adding in any other context that you would like. I realize that there is so much that you can do to customize, but just kind of wanted to highlight some basics here as well, and then how you can amend. The other option here is if you only are targeting a few titles, of course, you could have just had it CEO and chief executive. Everyone else would have had, would you have time for a quick call? Another way to go about that. And what I mean by that is just removing this little bulk here in order to kind of streamline it or adding in more as you saw. Now, other things to consider, and that's why I wanted to kind of highlight the other email stages in this sequence, is showing other examples of how we at Amplemarket are using liquid syntax. So you can see here, this is based on the lead's location and then the greeting that we would be providing. It's worth noting that when and else if, where is that? Yeah, else if here are very similar. So if you are still new to liquid syntax, feel free to continue with else if. You do not need to use when as the coding option. In fact, else if is what's included in our dynamic fields. Wanted to mention this just in case you saw this nuance between when and else if. It's almost one and the same. But if, let's say, that we don't have all of these covered, let's go here and see if we have any. I was going to see if we could add in another country, but let's say Brazil was one that we don't have currently. What you'd want to do is then add in Brazil with hola to make sure that we are covering our bases. And then, of course, you can add in as many as you would like. And then you can see here other examples of how we at Amplemarket are using it. So again, call to action with random number, really great for random number. In our call script, we're also including liquid syntax. That way it's plugging in some basics. So that way when we're calling, we have some data points to be able to reference back without having to add that in manually, saving everyone time as well. Now, the other one I wanted to quickly mention is this particular email stage. We saw a bit of that when we were in the examples from our deck, but just wanted to kind of quickly show again what this looks like at scale, and then being able to go through preview mode and see these slight shifts as well. And like I mentioned, if there's anything else that you would need to add in, you can do so. So again, if let's say CRO isn't accurate, we can update it to CMO, and then of course make all those slight changes as needed. Now, this, for the most part, concludes the demo aspect. So I want to quickly pause to see if there's anything else that I can help with. I don't know if both there's anything in chat.
There's one question from Dimitri. I answered it, but I'll just kind of bring it up just in case nobody read it. But he asked if he can see the analytics of which parts of his liquid syntax performed best. And currently that's not possible to see within Amplemarket. We do all kind of analytics and reporting on a sequence by sequence basis. So depending on like what you're really doing there, I mean, if you're making really meaningful differences within the emails, it might be best to just put them in different sequences so that way you can track which value prop performed better if that's something that you're wanting to test out. A lot of liquid syntax is just helping with kind of small differences that are just going to change based on the title. Like maybe you're going to mention a different title, or you're going to include a different case study depending on their company size, things like that. And I'll also mention that there's certain things you can do. Like let's imagine you have one sequence, you have different personas in it. If you've defined your personas in your searcher, you can sort your analytics by persona. So you're not necessarily seeing it specifically by the liquid syntax, but if you know that you changed your liquid syntax by one title versus the other, then you go into your analytics and you can see which of those titles actually tends to respond the best. And then that would, of course, give you information in knowing what, aspect of that performed better. And it looks like we had another question from Modi. What are the plus 1% and modulo 3? Are these set values or do I need to change them? So he's asking about the assign random numbers thing.
Okay. So in that scenario, let me pull up chat just to see the. So I would keep the plus 1% and modulo 3. Modulo 3 is meaning that we are assigning three different numbers, 1, 2, or 3. So I would definitely recommend to keep that. As far as 1%, the specific coding itself, I'm not quite as sure, but we can share that information as a follow-up. But yeah, anytime you're seeing coding within the liquid syntax example, I would recommend keeping that. And then where you can really customize is based on, you can see here, within the quotations, adjusting that particular information or adding or removing options. So being able to add in more else ifs as needed, or as we saw, adding in more whens, or removing it to just being if or else. That would be my top recommendation. Good questions. Well, this actually goes into our Q&A as well, so I can stay on Amplemarket if we have anything specific here. Oh, we do have another question. Yes, you can have as many options as you want. You can see here that this is a perfect example of several options, and this also applies to else if. So depending on how many personas or data points you're trying to target, by all means, you can add them in without changing the modulo. Okay, so this is still specific to random number. Let me find out for you. If this is specific to random number, we'll keep you posted. When it comes to random choice, though, the this would be another one that you could do without having to adjust modulo. So when we're thinking about random choice here, all you'd have to do is just add in that line and keep going. So that might be the best like interim workaround till we can get that modulo question answered for you.
Eileen had a good question in our Q&A section. She asked, for some of our leads, the titles or other fields don't have short, clear formatting. Their title would be something like Director of Infrastructure Equity, which then looks off in an email, because as a human, you would just write Director. Any way to get around that?
Ooh. In that scenario, because we actually had a few like that. So for example, earlier I saw VP of engineering. So rather than saying as a VP of engineering, you might like this, you could add in VP or plug in director like this. And then you could say as a director and then whatever else you need. And then as a VP, and that alleviates the length of the title, which I agree could be a bit much in an outreach.
It is an
Is
important note there on the syntax. It says if the title contains director, so it doesn't have to be a direct match, just as long as their
Mhm.
title has the word director in it, even if it's director of infrastructure, equity, blah, blah, blah. It just has the word director in it. So then in your email, it's just going to say director.
Good questions. All right, well, I'll go back to the deck here and we'll just stick on the time for question, just in case anything else pops up. We definitely want to make sure we're helping you here. All right, well, if anything pops up as you begin to use liquid syntax from today's call, we hope you do. Feel free to email us. And thank you so much. Oh, let me see if there might be a question here. Yes, so the samples of syntax both in this deck will be provided to you as a resource. And then also all of those examples that are housed within the platform. So I'll quickly go here to show that. These are all the examples that we would also recommend. But yes, I wanted to make sure that we provided these examples shown from earlier, so that way you could also see some specifics that we're doing within our own BD team, and in addition to what we have provided within the application. Very good questions. Of course. All right. Well, if anything else pops up, of course, if there's anything today, happy to stay longer. But feel free to email us at success@amplemarket.com. Both Bo and I manage that mailbox. We are here to help. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today and joining our session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, y'all.
Take care.